quadratic equations with complex solutions. So complex solutions means that there might be one answer, there might be an imaginary number. So whenever it says complex, you have two different options. You can use the quadratic formula, which is shown right here. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Or you can see if you can square root all the terms. I like to start with that one because if you can do that, you get your answer right away. So we're going to do both of these types. Okay? So in our first equation, we have x squared plus 16 equals 0. So I can see that the x is squared, and just looking at 16, I know something times something equals 16. So number one is get the number without a letter on the other side. So that step is modeled right here. So I subtracted 16 from both sides to get x squared equals negative 16. The second step is to square root both sides. So that's what I did right there, is I square root both sides. So after I did that, remember the square root and the square, they cross each other out, so only x is left. So then what happens is I cannot have a negative underneath a square root. So if I do have one, that becomes an imaginary number. Okay, so that's a very important step to remember. So going back over here, instead of negative 16, it turns into an I for imaginary. Okay, so the square root of 16 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, so then I keep plus or minus 4i, and that's my answer. Okay, let's go down to the second example. So this one's a trinomial, and it has a lot of different numbers going on in here. So this one doesn't look as simple, so I'm going to go straight into the formula. So I have to find my a, b, and c. So it goes a has a squared, b has a normal x, and c is always the normal number. So over here I want a is 1, b is 12, and c is 38. So you can write them to the side so you don't forget. And remember, don't put any x's in your a, b, or c's. It'll mess you up later. So down below I plugged it into the formula. So x equals negative b. So going back up to the formula, notice that the formula has a negative b. You have to keep that negative no matter what. If your b turns out to be negative, you have to put two negatives in there. Okay? So popping back down here, I have negative b, which is 12, plus or minus square root b, or 12, minus 4ac, so 1 and 38, divided by 2a, which is 1. From there, you can simplify. Simplify just means put numbers together. So you can multiply, you can divide, whatever seems easiest. Let me switch my hand there. So what I did here is I simplified by doing 4 times 1 times 38. That's how I got that 152. On the bottom, I simplified by doing 2 times 1 to get 2. Okay, down here I simplified even further by doing 12 minus 152, and I got negative 140. So from here, I now have two answers, but that's a whole lot to be looking at. So what I did was I come over here and I saw that there was something weird under here. There was a negative. We can't have the negative because going back up to the previous question, there's no negatives. It turns into imaginary. So I had to plug that into my calculator, and I got an imaginary. So I did square root 140, and I got 11.8, and then there's a bunch of numbers after, so I just rounded it up to 11.8, and I put an I right after. So I'm just going to keep my answer like this for right now. Okay, so negative 12 plus or minus 11.8i divided by 2. Okay, so you have a worksheet based on this stuff right here. So you have two ways to do it. You can square root all terms or use the quadratic formula.